Hello everyone, welcome to GS Core. So gender related issues and the various dimensions related to gender have always been a very interesting area for UPSC to put questions on. There are various reports, indices which we discuss as part of the special report segment. They are highly relevant for not just quoting examples, hard data, as well as for making a case in favor or against of an argument. My name is Abhishiekh Saxena and I am a faculty at GS Core. And as part of today's special report session, we are going to talk about the Gender Parity Index. So let's get into the thick of it. So the index, as the name suggests, looks at gender parity. While we are talking about gender, largely the discourse has been related to males vis-a-vis females or vice versa. The aim of the Gender Parity Index is largely focused on education. The orientation of the index largely looks at the socio-economic dimension and education. So it is designed to measure the relative access to education. As you are aware that education is one of the most important public goods which is to be provided to the citizens of a country. And often with regards to access of public goods, it is felt that women are disadvantaged. Rather, they don't have adequate access to all the public goods as a matter of priority. So the Gender Parity Index look at the dimension of access to education relatively. That means for females vis-a-vis males. But to give the index a color that okay, it is women centric is something which is incorrect. That is our interpretation because often women are disadvantaged when it comes to access. The index itself is neutral and tries to give an empirical idea of how the access of education is in a particular country. Okay? It is released by UNESCO, which is, you are aware, is a global agency or a global institution. Okay. Similarly, we should have a look at other reports which look into the gender dimension, like the Gender Gap Report by World Economic Forum. Okay. Then the idea of calculation, how basically this index is arrived at. We'll get into the methodology as part of this session soon. However, just to give you an idea that X number of women can access the education vis-a-vis Y. So it is in a form of a ratio. Okay, it is in the form of a ratio. And the index basically looks at not just the collective ratio, but at three levels. That is primary, secondary, and tertiary. So it brings out not just the comprehensive picture, but also vis-a-vis the three levels which broadly gets categorized with regards to education globally. Okay. Then definition. So the ratio of girls to the boys. So here X would refer to girls and Y would refer to boys. X would refer to girls and Y would refer to the boys. So if we are looking at this ratio with respect to the primary level, and let us say that for every 10 boys, 8 girls are able to access the education. So this is in a measure of the access vis-a-vis both the genders. So we can say here girls are at a certain disadvantage. If let us say the ratio stands like this, so it is 1:1. That means it is an equitable excess, right? So while the number crunching is done in an empirical form, the deductions can point out to the inherent biases in a country or the inherent limitations in the country, whether we look at it granularly from society perspectives, from policy perspectives, but this number will point us towards a direction. Okay? Then a very important measure which is given by this particular index is gross enrollment ratio. Gross enrollment ratio. Basically, every country has different size of population. They have different number of males and females. They have different, different quantum of population in the eligible age bracket for access to education. So therefore, GER, as it is called, is the number of pupils enrolled in a given level of education. GER is the number of pupils means students, enrolled in a given level of education. You remember we talked about primary, secondary and tertiary. In a given level of education, regardless of age, expressed as a percentage of population in the theoretical age group of the same level of education. So basically it's a standardization. Okay? Just like I demonstrated with the example that how these hard numbers point us towards a deduction, right? So a GER of 1, indicates that there is a parity between girls and boys. Okay? A GER of less than 1, would indicate a disparity in favor of males. That means males are getting better access vis-a-vis the females. At the same time, a GER of greater than 1, I beg your pardon, a GER of less than 1 and greater than 1, that is reverse, female, and here it would mean males. Okay? So just like the example we gave, 8 to 10, so the GER would boils down to 0.8. That means that girls are at a disadvantage here. That means it is a GER which is less than 1. That is this one, third one. So it is biased in favor of males. However, if the figures are like this, then it would mean 1.2. That means that it is biased in favor of females. Okay? So that is how we need to logically interpret these numbers when we look at the data country-wise. So we can use this particular index and the GER values quoted comprehensively as well as for various levels of education in our arguments to justify the utility of a particular program. So you have many programs being run for education in general. For example, Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. Right? So we can make better appreciation of these programs as well as the index can be used as a yardstick in medium to long term to judge the efficacy of these programs. Okay? One more thing which is of significance here is the indicator aspect. Apart from the indicator aspect is the Sustainable Development Goal 4. The Sustainable Development Goal 4. It says ensure inclusiveness and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities. So while as a standalone idea, this index is relevant to judge the performance of a country on access to education for its children and the gender balance in that, it is also a very important indicator for Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is related to education and its achievement. Because as a nation, we have pledged to these goals and that we will do our best to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, which lay a broad roadmap for the holistic sustainable development of our country. Okay? Then let us look at certain implications. See, as I discussed in the introduction itself, that women are largely the disadvantaged folks when we talk about the access to public goods. Okay, so low status of women or the notional lower status of women in a society immediately translates into the lack of opportunities and basically restricts them from realizing their true potential. Okay, at the same time, the flourishing and the development of women and their empowerment have other bearing effects. For example, if women grow, when I say women grow, growth in terms of their education, their overall standard of living, they have implications. They have implications, for example, related to physical and mental health, autonomy and decision making in a household. Right? So this particular index can be a starting point to point out the larger malaise of the disadvantageous position of women. At the same time, the lower position of women would have implications for the overall well-being of not just themselves but their children as well. Okay? So these are the broader implications, and if we look at the women and children aspect, we will have further implications related to issues like malnutrition. If a woman is literate, a woman has a say in decision making, whether that woman earns on her own or not, at least it will enable that woman, the education will enable that woman to have a potential of some sort of self-employment, and that in turn will translate into further economic independence, and that will have a bearing on the way children are raised, because largely still it is an empirical fact that largely the health, education, etc. of the children depends on their mothers. Okay? So, as you can see in this particular graphic, it has been told that if the percentage of women enjoy gender parity, she is empowered, okay, and it leads to empowerment score of the primary male in the household. Okay, the empowerment score is equal or greater than the empowerment score of the primary male in the household. It also is an indicator of the empowerment gap that in a society, how women stand vis-a-vis the male counterparts in the empowerment. And empowerment is not just a function of, let us say that okay, they have job or money. It is about opportunities. It is about the ability to make decisions. It is about realizing their own potential. Okay. So that is something which are the implications which we can draw from this particular index. Hence, the analysis, the extrapolation of it remains very crucial to cite as example, to cite as pointers, indicators, orientators while writing answers in the mains examination. At the same time, the utility of the index and its salient features holds importance for the preliminary examination. Now, let us look at how this index is arrived at. Let us look at how this index is arrived at. So, level 1 is the primary education, okay, and level 2 and 3 depends on the secondary education and the tertiary education, as different countries have different system. Basically, the official school age for each level of education is reference to the international classification of education. Then the numbers are taken separately. Okay. So, for example, the population is 100, right? And 10 females go to school. So, the number of females going to school divided by the total number of the people or the population which can go to school or is in the eligible bracket. Okay. Then the other aspect is calculated for males. Let us say with males also we have a similar argument. So, here the ratio is this. This is first, this is second. Then the GER is calculated as 1 by 2 here. Okay. So, the gender parity index is calculated by dividing the female gross enrollment ratio. This will be the female gross enrollment ratio. This will be the male gross enrollment ratio. And then it will be arrived at. In this particular example, it will be 1:1. That means that there is absolute parity in access to education for women and males. Okay. So that is the larger calculation. Though it may seem fairly simple, but the normalization exercise and the other things and collection of data for around 183 countries is a mammoth task. Now, let us look at the gender parity index and India's performance in it. So, for higher education, and these are the figures largely from 2016 to 2019. Okay, higher education in 2019-2020 stood at 1.1, and the figures in 2018 vis-a-vis 2019 was 1.0. So, a certain parity in favor of women. Okay. Then pupil to teacher ratio, while it looks at a substantive aspect of gender parity, it also looks at the other subheads. For example, the teacher to student or teacher to pupil ratio. It stood at 26. It stood at 26 in 2019-2020. Okay. So these are some of the takeaways. as per the index, 3.38 crore students were enrolled in programs at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. Out of these, nearly 85%, that is almost 2.8 crores, were enrolled in 6 major disciplines such as humanities, sciences, commerce, engineering, medical sciences, information technology and computers. So this also shows the distribution of the pupils across the major streams. So you can say that we need to diversify our stream portfolio as well. So while it gives gender orientation, it gives certain other dimensions for a country as well. Okay. It also gives data about the total number of teachers, total enrollment, etc. So you can see all that data is being reflected in the graphics. So this is total enrollment and this is the gross enrollment ratio, the GER, which we have been speaking about since the beginning of this session, right? Now let us move further. The Sustainable Development Goal 4 aspect. So as I told you that Sustainable Goal 4 is about access to education in an equitable manner and the learning opportunities. Okay. So they were adopted in the year 2015 and the target which has been sought is 2030. Now, the Sustainable Development Goal, while a broader vision is outlined by the title statement of equitable access, so on and so forth, it has 10 major targets, and those targets are: so the 10 major targets measured across indicators, measured across 11 indicators, okay, and the outcome oriented targets are, within this, the outcome oriented targets are seven. These targets are free primary and secondary education, the next one is equal access to quality pre-primary education, equal access to quality pre-primary education, affordable technical, vocational and higher education. Okay. Then increased number of people with relevant skills for financial success, elimination all discrimination, elimination of all discrimination in education. Okay. Universal literacy and numeracy. Okay. Education for sustainable development. Education for sustainable development and global citizenship. If you look at all these, you will find traces of these in the new education policy. So that is how we need to link things when we prepare for the civil services examination. For example, the imparting of fundamental literacy and numeracy skills have been greatly stressed as part of the education policy, which was unveiled in the year 2020. Okay. At the same time, the affordability of technical education, the expanse of technical education, STEM, women in STEM sector, science, technology, engineering, management sector, have been greatly emphasized as part of the national education policy. So what will this do? This will in a way enable India to chart the course for better access. So, for example, a question related to the overall analysis of national education policy can be asked, and within that question, using the gender parity index and the sustainable development goal 4, we can further cement the assertion, right? So that is the larger idea which gets conveyed by the gender parity index. Okay. Now let us look ahead for some key observations. Key observations. So in the financial year 2019, gender parity index at tertiary school level in India was 1. Financial year 2019, gender parity index at tertiary level was 1. Okay. The 4 fiscal years preceding to that, that means before this, we have seen a sustained increase. That means bettering of performance. Okay. Then the gender parity index at the primary school level for 2016-2019. For 2016-2019, the gender parity index in 2019 was 0.95 at the primary level. So we can deduce that the women or the female children were at a certain disadvantage vis-a-vis their male counterparts, right? So these are the large takeaways when we talk about the gender parity index. Now what is the way ahead? See, when we talk about education and the delivery of a public good like education, it is never an instantaneous project. It is a long-term project. Hence, as I pointed out, National Education Policy 2020 is a good initiative, at least a good orientation to chart our course for betterment of education sector. However, this needs to be backed up by adequate financial resources. We need to better Reduce the regional imbalances. We need to reduce the regional imbalances. Why somebody to get quality higher education needs to go to Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai or Hyderabad? Why can't it be available in a small district of every country, or in every district of our country, right? At the same time, we need better infrastructure, labs, classrooms. Then we need modular pedagogy, so that interdisciplinary education, more meaningful education can be encouraged. And this is something which forms one of the part of the National Education Policy 2020. But all said and done, all the policies are not as good as on what they are on paper. Rather, they are as good as how they are implemented. The education being one of the most vital elements for development of any society and a country should be given its due stress and should not be kept on the sidelines when we talk about the overall agenda for our nation. So that's all for this special report. Until next time, thank you.